The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps as Maya Chen pressed herself against the cold concrete wall of the abandoned warehouse. Her breath came in shallow puffs, visible in the frigid December air that seeped through broken windows. The sound of boots echoed through the corridors, heavy, methodical, closing in. She counted them. 6 sets, maybe 7. Too many. Prepare y narrar es tipo de historia, nos elevado largos esfuerzos y trabajo duro. Así que, si estás disfrutando de la historia, por favor, considera suscribir en nuestro canal. Her fingers traced the small silver locket at her throat, a nervous habit she'd never been able to break. Inside that locket was a photograph of a little girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile, holding a white mouse. That little girl had died 3 years ago in a government facility that officially didn't exist. What emerged from that place was something else entirely, something they called Ghost 11. "Little mouse," came a voice from the shadows, soft and almost paternal. Director Harrison stepped into the weak moonlight, filtering through the skylight above. His silver hair was perfectly combed despite the late hour, his dark suit immaculate. He looked like someone's grandfather, the kind who might slip you candy when your parents weren't looking. Maya knew better. She'd seen what those gentle hands were capable of. "That's not my name," she whispered, though her voice carried further than it should have in the cavernous space. She'd learned to modulate her voice, to make it travel or disappear entirely, along with so many other things they'd taught her in the white rooms below ground. Harrison smiled, the expression never reaching his pale blue eyes. "You'll always be our little mouse, Maya. You were so small when you came to us. Do you remember? 7 years old, all alone after that terrible accident. We gave you a home." Behind Harrison, shapes moved in the darkness. Maya could make out Dr. Voss, her former handler, his clipboard ever present even now. Agent Martinez, whose kind eyes had fooled her for months before she learned he reported every word she spoke. Agent Thompson, newer to the program still. Uncomfortable with what they did to children, but not uncomfortable enough to stop it. "You gave me a cage," Maya said, stepping away from the wall. At 19, she stood barely 5 feet tall, her friend delicate as a bird's. They'd kept her small, she realized later. Easier to control, easier to underestimate. But in the past, 6 months since her escape, she'd learned to use every inch of her slight stature to her advantage. The warehouse stretched around them like a cathedral of rust and decay. This had once been Sterling Manufacturing, closed down after the environmental scandal of '89. Now it served as one of many safe houses Maya had established throughout the city. She'd chosen this one tonight because of its history, a place where cover-ups and corporate lies had once thrived, now standing as a monument to the truth that eventually surfaces. "Maya," Dr. Voss spoke for the first time, his accented voice still carrying that clinical warmth that had made her trust him once. "You're not well. The conditioning is breaking down without proper maintenance. You're experiencing identity confusion, paranoid delusions. Let us help you." She laughed, and the sound echoed strangely in the vast space, multiplying and distorting until it seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Is that what you call it? Conditioning? I call it 12 years of psychological torture disguised as patriotic duty." Maya closed her eyes and felt the familiar shift in her perception. The world expanded, her consciousness flowing beyond the boundaries of her physical form. She could sense the heat signatures of 7 men positioned throughout the warehouse. Feel the electromagnetic signatures of their weapons. Taste the metallic tang of their fear in the air. This was what they'd made her, a living surveillance system. A ghost who could slip through any net, hear any whisper, see any secret. But they'd made one crucial error. They'd taught her to disappear, but they'd never imagined she might use that gift to make them disappear instead. "Tell me about the others," Maya said, opening her eyes. In the moonlight, her pupils seemed to catch and hold the silver light, giving her an otherworldly appearance. "Tell me about Ghost 1 through Ghost 10. What happened to them, Harrison?" The director's composure cracked, just slightly. A muscle twitched in his jaw. "The program has had its challenges. Refinements were necessary. Refinements." Maya tasted the word like poison. "Ghost 7 was my roommate for 3 years, Lily Martinez. She could phase through solid matter, but only for 30 seconds at a time. One day she tried to escape through the walls and got stuck. They found her body 3 days later, halfway through 18 inches of concrete. Was that a refinement?" Agent Martinez, no relation to Lily, despite the shared name, shifted uncomfortably. Maya caught the movement in her peripheral vision, her enhanced senses picking up the slight change in his breathing pattern, the almost imperceptible tensing of his shoulders. "Ghost 4, Maya continued, taking a step forward. "The men surrounding her tensed, but she ignored them. David Kim. He could become invisible, but the process was killing him. Each time he phased out, a little more of him stayed gone. By the end, you could see right through him even when he wasn't trying to disappear. He begged you to stop the experiments. I heard him begging through the walls." "Maya," Harrison started. "Ghost 9, she said louder, her voice carrying power, now reverberating through the warehouse in a way that defied physics. "Sarah Williams, 11 years old. Could walk through dreams, access memories, see into people's minds. The last time I saw her, she was catatonic, lost in someone else's nightmare, unable to find her way back to her own consciousness. Where is she now, Harrison? Where are any of them?" The silence stretched taut between them, filled only by the whistle of wind through broken glass and the distant hum of the city beyond. Maya felt the weight of all those lost children, all those experiments disguised as gifts, all those promises of purpose and belonging that had really been chains. Dr. Voss cleared his throat. "The Ghost program has been instrumental in national security operations. The sacrifices made." "Sacrifices?" Maya's voice dropped to barely a whisper, but somehow it filled the entire space. "They were children, Voss. We were all children. The youngest was 5 years old when you took her. 5. Do you remember Ghost 3, Emma? She could manipulate electromagnetic fields, but every time she used her abilities, it felt like being struck by lightning. I used to hold her while she screamed herself to sleep." Maya reached into her jacket, and immediately 6 red laser dots appeared on her chest. She froze, then slowly withdrew a crumpled photograph. Even in the dim light, the others could see it clearly, a group of children standing in a sterile white hallway, dressed in identical gray uniforms. Maya stood in the back row, barely visible behind the taller children, her dark hair pulled back severely, her expression blank and haunted. "This was taken on my 12th birthday, she said. "They told me it was a present, having my picture taken with the other ghosts. Look at our faces, Harrison. Look at what you did to us." Harrison's expression softened, and for a moment he looked genuinely pained. "Maya, I know it's hard to understand now, but everything we did was necessary. The threats this country faces are nothing compared to the threat you created," Maya interrupted. "You took broken children and made them into weapons. But here's what you never understood: weapons can choose their own targets." The temperature in the warehouse seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Maya's breath misted as she spoke, but she showed no sign of cold, despite wearing only a thin jacket over dark jeans and combat boots. She'd learned to regulate her body temperature, along with so many other biological functions they'd wanted to control. Agent Thompson, the newest member of the team, shifted nervously. "Sir, maybe we should." "Maybe you should what?" Maya turned her attention to him, and he visibly flinched. "Run? You should have run 3 years ago when you first learned about the program. Instead, you stayed. You watched them experiment on children, and you stayed." Maya began to move, not toward any of them, but in a slow circle around the open floor of the warehouse. As she walked, Her footsteps made no sound on the concrete, as if she weighed nothing at all. The effect was deeply unsettling, a reminder that she was no longer entirely human, if she ever had been. "You want to know the real truth about Ghost 11? She said, her voice echoing from impossible directions now, as if the building itself was speaking. "They didn't just teach me to disappear. They taught me to slip between spaces that shouldn't exist, to move through dimensions that your science hasn't even discovered yet. I can be everywhere and nowhere, see everything and nothing." The laser sights tracking her began to waver as the men holding the weapons found it increasingly difficult to focus on her exact position. Maya seemed to flicker at the edges as if she was becoming transparent, fading in and out of reality itself. "But the most important thing they taught me," Maya continued, her voice now seeming to come from directly behind Harrison, though she stood 20 feet away, was how to find people. How to track them across any distance, through any disguise, past any security. They made me into the perfect hunter, Harrison, the perfect ghost. The director's hands clenched at his sides. "What do you want, Maya? Why did you bring us here?" Maya stopped moving and stood perfectly still in the center of the warehouse floor. The moonlight seemed to gather around her, making her appear almost luminescent against the dark concrete. When she smiled, it was not a pleasant expression. "I want you to tell me about Project Resurrection," she said. "I want you to explain why the program supposedly ended 3 years ago, but you're still running it. I want to know about the new children you've taken, the ones you think I don't know about." The silence that followed was profound. Maya could hear Harrison's heart rate spike, could sense the sudden tension that gripped every man in the warehouse. She'd struck home. "I don't know what you're talking about," Harrison said, but his voice lacked conviction. Maya laughed, and this time the sound was genuinely amused. "Dr. Voss's laptop, left open in his car 3 nights ago outside the Marriott downtown. Agent Martinez's cell phone, accessed while he slept last week. Thompson's classified emails, read while he was in the shower yesterday morning. Did you really think I couldn't find you wherever you went? That I couldn't see whatever you tried to hide?" The men exchanged glances, their carefully maintained composure beginning to crumble. Maya had always been the most successful ghost. The one who adapted fastest to the procedures, who showed the most promise. They'd never considered that those same qualities that made her valuable might also make her dangerous. "There are 12 new subjects," Maya continued relentlessly. "Children, between the ages of 6 and 14. You've learned from your mistakes with the first program, keeping them sedated more often, using more advanced psychological conditioning, implementing what you call emotional buffers to prevent them from forming attachments to each other." Maya's expression darkened, and the temperature in the warehouse dropped another degree. "Their names are Jennifer, Marcus, Anna, David, Sarah, yes, you reused that name, Michael, Elena, James, Lucy, Robert, Diana, and Kevin. The youngest is 6. 6 years old, Harrison. And you have her strapped to a table 16 hours a day while you pump experimental chemicals into her bloodstream." Dr. Voss stepped forward, his clipboard clutched against his chest like a shield. "Maya, you have to understand." "No," she said, and her voice carried a finality that silenced him immediately. "You have to understand. Those children are not your property. They are not your weapons. They are human beings, and you are torturing them in the name of national security." Maya reached up and unclasped the silver locket at her throat. She held it up so the moonlight caught its surface, sending dancing reflections across the warehouse walls. "Do you know what's in this locket, Harrison? The last photograph of Maya Chen, taken when she was 7 years old. The day before her parents died in that car accident. The day before she became your little mouse." She opened the locket with a soft click that somehow seemed to echo through the vast space. Inside, nestled against faded velvet, was indeed a small photograph. But also something else, a tiny electronic device, no bigger than a button battery. 4. 3 years, I've been recording everything, Maya said. Every conversation, every meeting, every classified briefing you thought was secure. This little device, created by your own technology department, has been broadcasting to 17 different dead-drop servers around the world. Every detail of the Ghost program, past and present, has been documented and stored. Harrison's face went pale. That's impossible. Your security was designed to keep threats out, not to keep your own assets in, Maya interrupted. Ghost 11 had access to everything. I've been walking through your most secure facilities for 3 years, and you never once thought to check if I was carrying anything out with me. The men surrounding her were growing increasingly agitated, their weapons trained on a target that seemed to phase in and out of their sights. Maya paid them no attention. Her focus was entirely on Harrison, on the growing desperation in his eyes as he began to understand the magnitude of what she'd done. What do you want? He asked again, his voice barely above a whisper. Maya smiled again, and this time there was something almost gentle in the expression. I want you to release the children, all 12 of them. I want the program shut down permanently. And I want you to tell the world the truth about what you've done. You know we can't do that. Harrison said. I know you can't, Maya agreed. That's why I've taken the choice away from you. She held up her other hand, revealing a small electronic device similar to the one in her locket. Dead man's switch, she explained. If my heart stops beating for more than 30 seconds, or if I don't input a specific code every 24 hours, every piece of evidence I've collected gets released simultaneously to every major news outlet, government watchdog organization, and human rights group in the world. The warehouse fell silent except for the wind and the distant sounds of the city. Maya could feel the weight of their stares, could sense the calculations running through their minds as they tried to find a way out of the trap she'd constructed. Around them, 3 years, she said softly. 3 years of freedom, and I spent every moment of it preparing for this conversation. Learning your routines, mapping your weaknesses, gathering evidence. They trained me to be a weapon, but they forgot to consider what would happen if that weapon chose its own target. Maya began to walk backward toward the shadows at the far end of the warehouse, her movements fluid and silent. You have 72 hours to make your choice, Harrison. Release the children and confess to the world, or watch everything you've built burn when the truth comes out anyway. The only difference is that in one scenario, those 12 children live. In the other ... she shrugged. Well, I suppose that depends on how quickly the authorities can find them after the story breaks. Maya, wait, Harrison called out. But she was already fading into the darkness, her form becoming indistinct and ghostly. Goodbye, Director, her voice echoed from the shadows. Give my regards to Dr. Voss. Tell him Ghost 11 sends her compliments on his excellent training program. He taught me everything I needed to know to destroy you. The men stood in silence for long moments after she disappeared, their weapons still trained on empty air. Finally, Agent Martinez lowered his gun and turned to Harrison. Sir, what are our orders? Harrison stared into the darkness where Maya had vanished, his face a mask of rage and something that might have been fear. Find her, he said quietly. Find her and bring her back. The program cannot be exposed. But even as he spoke the words, Harrison knew they were already too late. Maya Chen was no longer their little mouse. She had become exactly what they'd trained her, to be a ghost who could slip through any net, evade any pursuit, strike from any shadow. The only question now was whether they would give her what she wanted or whether they would force her to take it. As the men filed out of the warehouse, none of them noticed the small device tucked into a crack in the concrete wall, its tiny red light blinking steadily as it recorded every word they'd spoken. Maya had been telling the truth about documenting everything, including this conversation. Somewhere in the darkness of the city, Ghost 11 smiled and began to plan her next move. The game was far from over, and she held all the cards. Maya. Chen had never slept well, not since the car accident when she was 7, and certainly not since her 3-year escape from the facility. In the cramped studio apartment she'd rented under a false identity, she lay on a mattress on the floor, staring at the water stains on the ceiling that reminded her of the maps they used to show her in the white rooms. Countries to infiltrate, targets to surveil, secrets to steal. Even in freedom, she couldn't escape the geography of her captivity. The apartment was sparse by necessity. Few possessions meant fewer things to leave behind when she inevitably had to run again. A small refrigerator hummed in the corner, stocked with energy bars and bottled water. A laptop sat on a folding table, its screen dark but always ready. And on the single windowsill, growing in a coffee mug with a chip in the handle, was a small plant she'd rescued from a dumpster. She'd never known what kind it was, but she watered it faithfully every morning, amazed each day that something so fragile could survive in such harsh conditions. This morning, like every morning for the past 3 years, Maya woke before dawn and immediately checked the 17 different encrypted channels where her evidence was stored. All secure, all waiting. She input the daily code that would reset the dead man's switch timer, then sat cross-legged on her mattress and began the meditation routine they'd taught her at the facility. Breathe in for 4 counts. Hold for 7. Breathe out for 8. Repeat until the world becomes clear and her enhanced senses settle into their baseline state. The irony wasn't lost on her that she still used their techniques, still relied on the very training that had been designed to control her. But Maya had learned to transform their tools into her own weapons. Where they had intended to create compliance, she had found rebellion. Where they had sought to instill loyalty to the state, she had discovered loyalty to the innocent. Her phone buzzed, a cheap prepaid device she replaced every 2 weeks. Only one person had this number. "Morning, Mouse," came the familiar voice when she answered. Sarah Martinez, no relation to the agent who'd helped recapture her. Sarah was a nurse at Children's Hospital downtown, and the closest thing to a friend Maya had allowed herself since her escape. "I've asked you not to call me that," Maya said, though there was no real irritation in her voice. Sarah was one of the few people who knew some version of Maya's story, not the whole truth, but enough to understand why a 19-year-old girl lived like a fugitive and flinched whenever strangers got too close. "Sorry, old habit." "How did your meeting go last night?" Maya had told Sarah she was confronting someone from her past about the abuse she'd suffered in a government facility. It wasn't entirely a lie, just carefully edited to remove the parts about superhuman abilities and classified programs. "As well as could be expected," Maya said, walking to the window. From the 3rd floor, she could see the early morning shift change at the hospital across the street. Sarah would be starting her rounds soon. They weren't interested in apologizing. I'm not surprised. Powerful people rarely are. Sarah's voice carried the weariness of someone who'd seen too much of humanity's capacity for cruelty. "You know, you can't force them to feel remorse, right? Sometimes the best thing you can do is save yourself and let the rest go." Maya traced patterns on the glass with her finger, watching the condensation from her breath disappear in spirals. What if saving yourself means condemning others to suffer what you suffered? "Oh, honey," Sarah's voice softened. "That's not your responsibility. You were a victim too." But Maya knew it wasn't that simple. She thought of the 12 children strapped to tables in the facility's lower levels, going through the same procedures that had nearly destroyed her mind, enduring the same isolation that had taught her that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. The guilt of leaving them behind gnawed at her constantly, a physical ache that no amount of meditation could ease. After ending the call, Maya made her way to the small bathroom and stared at herself in the cracked mirror. The face looking back at her was still that of a 19-year-old, but her dark eyes held depths that belonged to someone much older. The years in the facility had stolen her childhood, replacing wonder with wariness, spontaneity with calculation. She'd grown exactly 3 inches since her escape from 4 feet 9 to 5 feet even. Her body finally able to develop normally without the cocktail of growth suppressants. They'd fed her to keep her small and manageable. Her hair, once kept in a severe bob, now hung past her shoulders in loose waves. Small acts of rebellion, but they mattered to her. Maya showered quickly, efficiently, always listening for sounds that didn't belong. The water pressure was weak, and the shower head leaked, but it was better than the communal facilities at the government complex, where privacy was a foreign concept and even basic. Bodily functions were monitored and recorded. Dressed in dark jeans, combat boots, and a gray hoodie that helped her blend into any crowd, Maya left her apartment and began her morning routine. First stop, the coffee shop 3 blocks away where she'd established herself as a regular. The barista, a college student named Jake with kind eyes and paint-stained fingers, had stopped trying to make conversation months ago, accepting that the small Asian girl who always ordered black coffee and sat in the corner booth preferred to be left alone. Maya chose her seat strategically back to the wall, clear view of both exits, positioned to overhear conversations at nearby tables without appearing to eavesdrop. Her enhanced hearing picked up fragments of phone calls, whispered arguments between couples, complaints about bosses and classes and bills, normal problems. Normal lives. She envied them their normalcy, even as she knew she could never be part of it. From her laptop, Maya monitored news feeds from around the world, looking for any mention of unusual government activity, unexplained disappearances of children, or facilities that might be housing new iterations of the ghost program. She'd identified 17 possible locations across the country, though only one had been confirmed: the underground complex beneath what appeared to be an agricultural research station in rural Virginia, the same complex where she'd spent 12 years of her life. Maya's coffee had gone cold while she worked, but she drank it anyway. Food and drink were fuel, nothing more. Pleasure was a luxury she couldn't afford, enjoyment a vulnerability that could be exploited. The facility had taught her that every positive emotion was a potential weapon in the hands of her captors. At 9:47 a.m., Maya's specialized monitoring software picked up a familiar communication signature. Harrison was making calls from his secure phone, and the encryption patterns matched those she'd recorded during her years of surveillance. Maya slipped on a pair of inconspicuous earbuds and began listening to the conversation, her modified devices easily penetrating the government's supposedly unbreakable security protocols. Situation is contained for now, but we need to accelerate the timeline, Harrison was saying. Maya Chen poses an unacceptable risk to national security operations. Sir, came another voice. Agent Thompson, Maya realized. Perhaps we should consider her offer. If the program becomes public knowledge, the program will not become public knowledge, Harrison interrupted sharply. We've invested too much to let one unstable subject destroy everything we've built. Dr. Voss believes he can develop a countermeasure to her abilities within 72 hours. Maya's blood ran cold. A countermeasure. They were going to try to strip her of her abilities, to make her helpless again. She thought of the children in the facility, wondered if they would develop similar countermeasures for them as well. The idea of those kids being left defenseless, unable to even try to escape, filled her with rage. What about the evidence she claims to have collected? Thompson asked. We're working on the assumption that she's bluffing, Harrison replied. Psychological analysis suggests that despite her abilities, Maya still thinks like the traumatized child she was. She wants to negotiate, to find a peaceful solution. That's her weakness. Maya closed her eyes and forced herself to breathe steadily. They still saw her as broken little mouse, still believed they understood her psychology better than she understood herself. It was a mistake that would cost them everything. Increase surveillance on all known associates, Harrison continued. The nurse at the hospital, the barista at the coffee shop, the elderly woman who feeds stray cats in the park where Maya sometimes sits. If she cares about anyone, we'll use them to bring her in. Maya's enhanced hearing picked up the subtle changes in the men's voices, the barely perceptible shifts in tone that indicated stress, fear, determination. They were going to hurt innocent people to get to her. Sarah, Jake, Mrs. Patterson with her plastic containers of cat food and her stories about her late husband, all of them would become casualties in a war they didn't even know was being fought. She ended the surveillance session and closed her laptop, her hands shaking with suppressed fury. They wanted to play games with innocent lives. She would show them what a real ghost could do. Maya left the coffee shop and walked 17 blocks to a different neighborhood, her route deliberately circuitous to shake any surveillance. She ducked into alleys, cut through buildings, used fire escapes and maintenance tunnels, all the tricks she'd learned during her 3 years of freedom. By the time she reached her destination, she was confident she was alone. The storage unit was registered under one of her false identities, paid for a year in advance with cash. Inside, hidden beneath boxes of old clothing and worn furniture, were the real tools of her trade. Not the government-issued equipment they'd trained her to use, but devices of her own creation, built from salvaged electronics and powered by her unique abilities. Maya pulled out a device that looked like a simple smartphone but had been modified far beyond its original specifications. This was her link to the network of allies she'd been building over the past 3 years, not friends exactly, but people who shared her commitment to exposing government overreach and protecting the innocent. She typed a simple message: package delivery in 48 hours. Full contents: confirm receipt and distribution protocols. The reply came within minutes: confirmed. Standing by for delivery. Stay safe, Ghost. Maya smiled grimly. They called her Ghost too, but for very different reasons than the facility had. To her network of whistleblowers, journalists, and human rights activists, Ghost was a symbol of resistance, someone who could penetrate any security, access any information, expose any corruption. They didn't know about her supernatural abilities. They attributed her successes to exceptional hacking skills and an extensive network of informants that let them believe that. The truth was far stranger than they could imagine. Maya left the storage unit and began walking toward the industrial district on the city's outskirts. She had another routine to complete, one that she'd established in the early days of her freedom when paranoia and isolation threatened to drive her completely insane. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she visited the old textile factory where homeless veterans gathered for warmth and safety in numbers. She brought them food, not charity, but payment for services rendered. These were men and women who'd been abandoned by the same government that had created and destroyed Maya. They understood surveillance. They recognized the signs of psychological warfare, and they asked no questions when she needed information about unmarked government vehicles or unusual activity in the city. "Morning, Maya," called out Roberto, a former Marine who'd lost his leg to an IED in Afghanistan in his home. "To medical bills. Got anything good today?" Maya handed him a bag of sandwiches she'd picked up at a deli 3 blocks away. "Turkey and Swiss, like you asked for. And some of those cookies your daughter likes." Roberto's face softened. His daughter visited him twice a month, sneaking away from her mother who disapproved of his living situation. Maya had learned this through casual conversation over the past year, filing away details about the lives of people who mattered to her. She bought the cookies because she remembered him mentioning that his 8-year-old daughter loved snickerdoodles. "You don't have to keep doing this," Roberto said, though he accepted the bag gratefully. "We know you don't have much." Maya shrugged. "We look out for each other. That's what people do." It was a philosophy she'd learned not from the facility, where every relationship was transactional and every kindness had a price, but from these forgotten veterans who shared their meager resources without question and defended each other against a world that had discarded them. She spent an hour with them, listening to their stories, sharing what little news she could about city plans that might affect their informal community. These people had been trained to notice things others missed, to survive in hostile environments, to recognize threats before they materialized. Their insights had saved Maya's life more than once. As she prepared to leave, Roberto caught her arm gently. "Maya, you seem tense today, more than usual." "Everything okay?" Maya hesitated. Roberto had been kind to her, and she hated lying to him. But the truth would put him in danger. "Just some old business I have to take care of," she said finally. "People from my past who won't let go. Need any help?" Most of us here know a thing or two about dealing with persistent problems. The offer was genuine, and Maya was touched by it, but she couldn't involve these people in her war against the facility. They'd suffered enough at the hands of their government. "Thanks, but this is something I have to handle myself," she said. "Just ... if you don't see me for a while, don't worry. Sometimes I have to travel for work." Roberto studied her face with the practiced eye of someone who'd learned to read people under life-and-death circumstances. "Be careful, kid. Some ghosts from the past don't stay buried." Maya nodded and walked away, Roberto's words echoing in her mind. He had no idea how literally true that statement was. The walk back to her neighborhood took 45 minutes, during which Maya's enhanced senses picked up at least 3 different surveillance teams trying to track her movements. They were good government trained, using advanced equipment and coordinated tactics. But they were still thinking conventionally, still trying to follow someone who moved through normal space using normal methods. Maya ducked into a subway entrance, paid her fare, and boarded a train heading north. At the 3rd stop, she exited with the crowd, then immediately doubled back and caught a southbound train. But instead of staying on the train, she slipped between cars and used her abilities to phase through the subway tunnel walls, emerging in the maintenance areas that honeycomb beneath the city. Down here in the darkness, surrounded by steam pipes and electrical conduits, Maya could move unseen through the urban underground. It had taken her months to map these passages, to find the routes that connected buildings across the city center. She moved like water through spaces barely wide enough for her small frame, her enhanced senses allowing her to navigate in complete darkness. She emerged in the basement of a commercial building 6 blocks from her apartment, slipped up the fire stairs, and exited through a loading dock that put her behind the surveillance teams that were still watching her building's front entrance. Maya made her way to Sarah's hospital using surface streets and cutting through a park where Mrs. Patterson was indeed feeding stray cats, just as Harrison's surveillance had noted. The elderly woman looked up as Maya passed and smiled, raising an arthritic hand in greeting. Maya waved back, her heart aching with the knowledge that this kind woman was now in danger, simply for being friendly to the wrong person. At the hospital, Maya used the staff entrance she'd memorized during previous visits. Her abilities allowed her to slip past security cameras and avoid the areas where visitors were required to check in. She found Sarah in the pediatric ward, checking on a little boy who couldn't have been more than 6 years old, the same age as the youngest child in the facility. "Hey," Sarah said, looking up from the chart she was updating. "What are you doing here? I thought you had that job interview this afternoon." Maya had lied about the interview, just as she lied about so many things in her carefully constructed cover story. It got postponed. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by." Sarah's expression grew concerned. "Are you okay? You look pale." Maya wasn't sure how to answer. She'd come here to say goodbye, to see one last time the only person who'd shown her genuine kindness without expecting anything in return. But looking at Sarah's worried face, seeing the way she instinctively moved closer as if to offer comfort, Maya realized she couldn't do it. She couldn't drag Sarah into this war. But she also couldn't bear to lose the one connection that made her feel human. "I'm fine," Maya lied. "Just tired. Haven't been sleeping well." Sarah nodded, understanding. "The nightmares again?" "Something like that." Maya watched the little boy sleep, his small chest rising and falling steadily. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "If you knew that helping someone would put yourself in danger, but not helping them meant they would definitely be hurt, what would you do?" Sarah considered the question seriously. "I suppose it would depend on how much danger and how much help they really needed. But generally speaking, I became a nurse because I believe we have a responsibility to help when we can, even if it costs us something." Maya nodded, filing away the answer. Sarah was good, genuinely good, in a way that Maya had almost forgotten existed. It made what Maya had to do even harder. "Sarah, I might have to go away for a while, family business. I wanted to thank you for being such a good friend." "How long is a while?" Sarah asked, and Maya could hear the concern in her voice. "I don't know. Maybe a few weeks, maybe longer." Sarah pulled Maya aside, away from the sleeping child. "Maya, are you in some kind of trouble? Because if you are, there are people who can help. Legal aid, social services, it's not that kind of trouble," Maya said quickly. "I just have some things I need to take care of." Sarah studied her face for a long moment. "This is about those people from your past, isn't it? The ones who hurt you?" Maya nodded, not trusting her voice. "Be careful," Sarah said, echoing Roberto's words from earlier. "Sometimes the best way to deal with the past is to leave it buried and build something new." But Maya knew she couldn't leave it buried. Not when 12 children were suffering in the same white rooms where she'd spent her adolescence. Not when Harrison and his team were already planning to use innocent people as leverage against her. "I have to go," Maya said, surprising herself by reaching out and briefly squeezing Sarah's hand. Physical contact was still difficult for her, still triggered memories of restraints and medical procedures, but Sarah's warmth felt genuine and safe. "Take care of yourself," Sarah called after her as Maya walked away. Maya left the hospital with the weight of that kindness heavy in her chest. In 48 hours, when the evidence was released and the world learned about the ghost program, Sarah would understand why Maya had really come to say goodbye. She would realize that the quiet girl who bought coffee every morning and visited sick children was actually a government asset turned rogue, a living weapon who had chosen to declare war on her creators. That Maya hoped Sarah would forgive her for the lies. More than that, she hoped Sarah would be safe when Harrison's people came looking for ways to hurt Ghost 11. The afternoon stretched before Maya like a battlefield waiting for the first shot to be fired. She had 36 hours until her deadline expired, 36 hours to prepare for whatever Harrison and his team would try. She spent those hours methodically checking and double-checking her safeguards, confirming that her evidence was secure and would be released automatically if anything happened to her. But even as she worked, part of her mind was elsewhere, replaying conversations from her childhood in the facility. Dr. Voss explaining that emotional attachments were weaknesses to be eliminated. Agent Martinez teaching her that caring about people would only lead to pain. Harrison himself, standing over her hospital bed after one of the more invasive procedures, telling her that little Mouse was special precisely because she had no one to miss her if the experiments went wrong. They had tried so hard to strip her of her humanity, to turn her into a perfect tool with no will of her own. And for years, Maya had believed they had succeeded. She'd felt empty, hollow, like a ghost, haunting the edges of life without ever truly living. But sitting in her sparse apartment as the sun set over the city, Maya realized they had failed. The proof wasn't in her supernatural abilities or her carefully planned rebellion. It was in the way her heart ached when she thought about Sarah's kindness, Roberto's friendship, Mrs. Patterson's innocent smile. It was in the rage she felt when she imagined what was being done to the children in the facility. They had tried to make her into a weapon, but they had accidentally created something far more dangerous, a person who cared deeply about justice and had the power to enforce it. Maya opened her laptop one final time before sleep, checking the encrypted channels where her evidence waited. Video recordings of experiments, audio files of planning sessions, financial records showing how the program was funded, medical reports detailing the procedures performed on children. Everything needed to bring down not just Harrison and his immediate team, but the entire network that had allowed the Ghost program to operate for decades. Tomorrow, she would give them one last chance to do the right thing. She would contact Harrison and offer him a final opportunity to release the children and shut down the program voluntarily. But Maya already knew what his answer would be. Men like Harrison didn't surrender power willingly, didn't admit fault when confronted with their crimes. They doubled down, escalated, tried to destroy the evidence and eliminate the witnesses, which meant that in less than 36 hours, Maya would have to do something she'd never done before: stop hiding and start fighting back with the full extent of her abilities. The thought terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. For 3 years, she'd been reactive, defensive, always running and hiding and planning from the shadows. But now she was going to step into the light and show the world what Ghost 11 could really do. Maya Chen, the scared little girl they called Little Mouse, was about to disappear forever. In her place would stand something new, a protector, a hunter, a ghost who fought for the living instead of serving the dead. She fell asleep that night with her hand on the silver locket, thinking not of the past but of the future she was about to create. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Maya's monitoring systems picked up an emergency communication from the facility at 5:23 a.m., and what she heard made her blood run cold. Subject 12 is in critical condition, Dr. Voss was reporting to Harrison. The new conditioning protocol has caused severe neural trauma. We're looking at potential permanent brain damage if we don't reverse the procedure within the next 18 hours. Maya sat bolt upright on her mattress, her enhanced hearing straining to catch every word of the encrypted transmission. Subject 12, that would be Kevin, the youngest boy in the program. 6 years old, taken from foster care 3 months ago when his caseworker reported him for unusual behavioral incidents. Can the damage be reversed? Harrison's voice carried the cold calculation Maya remembered so well. He wasn't asking because he cared about Kevin's well-being. He was asking because damaged assets were worthless assets. Possibly, but it would require stopping all current protocols and focusing entirely on neural repair. We would lose weeks of conditioning progress on the other subjects. That's unacceptable. Continue with the program. If Subject 12 doesn't survive, we have 11 others. Maya's hands shook with rage as she processed what she'd just heard. They were going to let a 6-year-old boy die rather than delay their experiments. Kevin, small for his age, afraid of the dark, who cried for his mother every night according to the surveillance reports Maya had accessed, was going to become another casualty in their pursuit of the perfect weapon. She was on her feet and moving before she'd fully formed a plan. Maya grabbed her emergency bag cache, false documents, weapons, and the specialized equipment she'd hoped never to use, and headed for the door. The deadline she'd given Harrison was still 30 hours away, but Kevin didn't have 30 hours. Maya's first stop was a 24-hour electronics store in the city's industrial district. Using cash and a fake ID, she purchased burner phones, portable batteries, and signal amplification equipment. The teenage clerk, half asleep behind the counter, barely looked at her as she made her purchases. From there, she drove a stolen motorcycle acquired through skills the facility had taught her, but never intended her to use for personal gain, to a warehouse she'd scouted months earlier. It was abandoned, isolated, and had the infrastructure she needed for what came next. Maya spent the next 4 hours setting up a mobile command center, linking her equipment to satellites and underground fiber optic networks. She was going to broadcast the truth about the ghost program to every news outlet, government watchdog, and human rights organization simultaneously. But first, she needed to add one more piece of evidence to her collection. She needed proof that they were willing to murder children. At 2:30 p.m., Maya initiated contact with the facility's security system. Her abilities allowed her to slip through electronic barriers as easily as she moved through physical ones, her consciousness sliding along data streams and electromagnetic fields. Within minutes, she had accessed the medical monitoring systems. For all 12 subjects, Kevin's vital signs were erratic, his brain activity showing the distinctive patterns of severe trauma. The other children showed signs of stress and sleep deprivation, but they were stable. For now, Maya began recording everything, not just data, but video feeds from the facility's security cameras. She watched Dr. Voss standing over Kevin's unconscious form, making notes on his clipboard, while the boy's small body convulsed from neural feedback. She recorded Agent Martinez discussing acceptable casualty rates with other personnel. She captured Harrison himself, standing in the observation deck overlooking the procedure rooms, watching children suffer with the detached interest of a scientist, observing lab rats. It was while she was documenting these atrocities that Maya detected incoming signals from Harrison's team. They had traced her electronic infiltration and were moving to her location. Multiple vehicles, armed personnel, orders to capture her alive if possible, but to prioritize stopping the data breach above all else. Maya smiled grimly as she uploaded the new evidence to her secure servers. They were too late. The information was already beyond their reach. But their timing was actually perfect for what she had planned next. Instead of fleeing, Maya began broadcasting on multiple emergency frequencies, her signal amplified and encrypted to punch through any jamming attempts. Her message went out to police departments, news stations, federal agencies, and international human rights organizations simultaneously. This is Maya Chen, also known as Ghost 11 of the United States. Government's classified human experimentation program. I am transmitting evidence of ongoing crimes against children, including torture, medical experimentation without consent, and premeditated murder. The evidence has been uploaded to secure servers and will be released to the public in 24 hours unless all subjects are immediately released and the program is shut down. She provided coordinates for the facility, detailed descriptions of the personnel involved, and access codes for the evidence servers. Then she waited. The response was swift and overwhelming. Within minutes, Maya's monitoring equipment detected emergency communications from every level of government. FBI field offices were mobilizing. CNN was putting together investigative teams. International human rights lawyers were filing emergency injunctions. The story was too big to contain, the evidence too comprehensive to discredit. But Maya also detected something else, a kill order. Harrison's voice came through the encrypted military channels with brutal clarity. All Ghost program assets are to be terminated immediately. Eliminate all evidence, destroy all documentation, and neutralize Maya Chen by any means necessary. This is a matter of national security. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the warehouse's poor heating. They weren't just going to try to recapture her. They were going to murder the children to hide the evidence, then hunt her down and kill her to ensure her silence. She had perhaps 20 minutes before Harrison's team reached her location. Maya used that time to upload one final message, this one directed specifically to law enforcement agencies. The subjects are in immediate danger. Harrison has given orders to eliminate all evidence, which includes murdering 12 children between the ages of 6 and 14. Emergency intervention is required at the Virginia facility within the next 6 hours, or all subjects will be killed. Maya then did something she'd never done before. She reached out directly to the children in the facility, using her abilities to penetrate the neural conditioning systems that kept them docile and compliant. The connection was painful, like trying to scream through a mouthful of glass. The facility's technology was designed to prevent exactly this kind of contact. But Maya pushed through the barriers, her consciousness touching each of the young minds trapped in the white rooms below ground. "Can you hear me?" she whispered across the electronic void. "My name is Maya. I'm going to get you out." The responses came back fragmented and confused, filtered through layers of psychological conditioning and pharmaceutical suppression. But they were there, 12 young voices, scared and alone, but still fighting to survive. "Who are you?" came a girl's voice, subject 7, Aina, age 9. "I was like you once," Maya replied. "They called me Ghost 11, but I escaped, and now I'm coming back for all of you." "The doctors say escape is impossible," replied another voice, subject 3, Marcus, age 12. "The doctors lied about many things," Maya said. "Stay strong. Help is coming." She could feel Kevin's presence too, weak and fading but still alive. Maya reached out to him specifically, pouring every ounce of her will into maintaining his neural stability until medical help could arrive. "Hold on," she whispered to the unconscious boy. "Please hold on." The sound of vehicles outside the warehouse interrupted her concentration. Maya quickly severed the connection and began packing her equipment. Through the dirty windows, she could see black SUVs surrounding the building, tactical teams taking positions at every exit. Maya activated the building's old fire suppression system, filling the air with chemical fog that would interfere with thermal imaging and radio communications. Then she began to move through the warehouse in ways that defied conventional physics, her form shifting between solid and incorporeal as she navigated around Harrison's forces. "Target is inside," she heard Agent Thompson report through his radio. "No visual confirmation. The building appears to be filled with some kind of smoke or gas." "She's trying to mask her escape," Harrison's voice crackled back. "Seal all exits. She doesn't leave this building." But Maya wasn't trying to escape. She was hunting. Agent Martinez was the first to die. Maya materialized behind him as he swept the eastern corridor, her hand passing through his chest to grip his heart directly. She didn't squeeze, that would have been murder. Instead, she induced a cardiac arrhythmia that sent him into unconsciousness within seconds. He would live, but he would never forget the feeling of Ghost 11's touch. Dr. Vos was next. Maya found him coordinating the search from the relative safety of an armored vehicle outside. She phased through the vehicle's walls and appeared in the seat beside him, her dark eyes reflecting the light from his tablet screen. "Hello, Doctor," she said softly. "Remember me?" Voss dropped his tablet and reached for his sidearm, but Maya was faster. She gripped his wrist and watched his face go pale as her abilities interfered with his nervous system, temporarily paralyzing his right arm. 12 years, Maya continued, her voice carrying the weight of all those lost days. 12 years of your experiments, your conditioning, your lies about making me stronger. Do you know what you really made me? "Maya, please," Voss began, but she cut him off. "You made me into justice," she said. Cold, inevitable, inescapable justice. Maya leaned closer, and Voss could see that her pupils were dilated, her breathing controlled, her entire presence radiating an otherworldly calm that was far more terrifying than rage would have been. "Kevin is dying because of you," she said. "A 6-year-old boy is brain damaged because you decided his suffering was acceptable collateral damage. How does that feel, Doctor? How does it feel to be responsible for torturing children?" "The program serves a greater purpose," Voss started. "The program ends today," Maya interrupted. "One way or another, it ends today." She released his arm and vanished, leaving him shaking and gasping in the driver's seat of his vehicle. Through his radio, Voss heard the panicked reports from the Tactical teams inside the warehouse. She's everywhere and nowhere. Target acquired negative, lost visual. Martinez is down. I repeat, Martinez is down. Where the hell is she? Maya was in the spaces between spaces, moving through dimensions that existed at the quantum level, places where thought and reality intersected. The facility had taught her to access these realms, but they'd never understood what they were unleashing. They'd created a being who could exist partially outside normal space-time, who could strike from angles that didn't technically exist. Agent Thompson found himself alone in the warehouse's main floor, his radio crackling with static, his thermal. I'm a AGING equipment showing heat signatures that appeared and disappeared like ghosts. When Maya materialized directly in front of him, he barely had time to register her presence before she was speaking. You're new, she observed, studying his face with clinical interest. How long have you known about the children, Thompson? I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered, but his weapon remained pointed at the floor. Something in Maya's presence made the idea of violence seem not just pointless, but impossible. 6 months, 3 weeks, 2 days, Maya said, answering her own question. That's how long you've been assigned to the Ghost program. Long enough to see the surveillance footage. Long enough to read the medical reports. Long enough to know exactly what's being done to 12 innocent children. Thompson's hands shook as he tried to process what he was seeing. Maya looked like a teenager, small and delicate, but she radiated power that made his trained instincts scream warnings. More disturbing was the way she seemed to know things she couldn't possibly know, as if she could read his thoughts and memories directly. I have orders, he said weakly. You have choices, Maya corrected. Every day, you made the choice to participate in the torture of children. Every report you filed, every search you conducted, every time you followed Harrison's orders, you chose to be complicit in their suffering. Maya took a step closer, and Thompson found himself unable to move, pinned in place by nothing more than her attention. But you can choose differently now, she continued. When the story breaks, when the world learns what the government has been doing to these children, you can be someone who helped expose the truth. Or you can be someone who helped cover it up until the very end. They'll court-martial me, Thompson whispered. Prison, disgrace, the end of my career. Better than being remembered as someone who tortured children, Maya replied. Though I suppose that depends on what you value more, your career or your soul. She stepped back, releasing him from whatever force had held him immobile. Choose. Quickly, Agent Thompson. History is being written right now, and you get to decide which side you're on. Maya vanished again, leaving Thompson alone with his conscience and the echoing sounds of chaos from outside. Harrison himself entered the warehouse 10 minutes later, flanked by 4 heavily armed agents and carrying enough firepower to level a city block. But Maya was waiting for him in the center of the main floor, standing in a shaft of sunlight that streamed through the broken skylights above. Hello, Director, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the vast space. Thank you for coming. We need to talk. Harrison raised his weapon, a prototype energy weapon designed specifically to disrupt supernatural abilities, and aimed it directly at Maya's chest. Maya Chen, by the authority of the United States government, you are under arrest for treason, theft of classified materials, and acts of terrorism against national security. Maya laughed, and the sound echoed strangely in the warehouse, seeming to come from multiple directions at once. Terrorism? I'm trying to save children from being tortured. If that's terrorism, then the word has lost all meaning. Those children are assets in a classified program vital to national defense, Harrison replied coldly. Your interference has compromised operations that protect millions of American lives. Those children are human beings, Maya said, her voice hardening. They have names, Harrison. They have dreams and fears and hopes for the future. They are not assets to be used and discarded. Harrison's finger tightened on the trigger. You were my greatest success, Maya, my perfect weapon. It breaks my heart to see what you've become. You never had a heart to break, Maya replied, and I was never your weapon. I was your victim, but today, that changes. The energy weapon discharged with a sound like thunder, filling the warehouse with blinding light. When the afterimages faded, Maya was gone, but her voice still echoed through the space. You have 4 hours, Harrison. 4 hours to release those children and shut down the program. After that, the evidence goes public and the whole world learns what you've done. Find her. Harrison roared to his remaining agents. Tear this building apart. She doesn't leave. Here alive. But Maya was already miles away, moving through the city's underground passages toward her final destination. She had given Harrison his ultimatum, demonstrated her capabilities, and made her position clear. Now came the hardest part, waiting to see if he would choose the children's lives over his own pride. Maya already knew what his choice would be. Men like Harrison didn't surrender, didn't admit fault, didn't accept defeat gracefully. They escalated until they destroyed everything around them rather than admit they were wrong. Preparer y narrar este tipo de historia. Nos ha lavado largos esfuerzos y trabajo duro. Así que, si estás disfrutando de la historia, por favor, considera suscribir a nuestro canal, which meant that in 4 hours, when her deadline expired and the evidence was released to the world, Harrison would try to eliminate all witnesses to his crimes, including 12 innocent children who had never asked to be part of his war. Maya reached her destination, a subway maintenance tunnel directly beneath the Virginia facility, and began preparing for the final confrontation. She had spent 3 years running and hiding, planning and preparing. Now it was time to show the world what Ghost 11 could really do when she stopped holding back. The children were running out of time. Kevin was dying. And Maya Chen was about to remind the world why some ghosts choose to haunt the living at 6:47 p.m., exactly 4 hours after Maya's ultimatum. The first news broadcast went live. This is breaking news from CNN. We have obtained exclusive evidence of a classified government program involving the systematic torture and experimentation on children. Warning: the following content is extremely disturbing and may not be suitable for all viewers. Maya watched the broadcast from a coffee shop in downtown Richmond, Virginia, her laptop connected to multiple news feeds simultaneously. She had kept her promise when Harrison refused to release the children. Every piece of evidence she'd collected over 3 years was released to 17 major news outlets around the world. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Video footage of 6-year-old Kevin convulsing on a medical table while Dr. Vos made clinical notes. Audio recordings of Harrison discussing acceptable casualty rates among child subjects. Financial records showing millions of dollars funneled to the Ghost program through black budget allocations. Medical reports detailing the permanent psychological and physical damage inflicted on children as young as 5 years old. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Oh my God. Maya, is this what you couldn't tell me about? Are you okay?" But Maya didn't have time to respond. Her monitoring equipment was picking up massive government communications traffic, emergency deployments of federal agents, and most importantly, evacuation orders for the Virginia facility. Harrison was cutting his losses, preparing to destroy all physical evidence and eliminate the remaining witnesses. Maya closed her laptop and walked out of the coffee shop, leaving a $20 bill on the table for the $2 coffee she'd barely touched. She had 45 minutes to reach the facility before Harrison's demolition teams completed their work. The drive took 38 minutes, pushing the stolen motorcycle far beyond safe speeds on rural Virginia highways. Maya could see the facility's lights in the distance, a compound disguised as an agricultural research station, surrounded by 12-foot fences and patrolled by guards who shot first and asked questions later. or at least, they had been patrolled. As Maya approached the perimeter, she could see that something had changed. Emergency vehicles lined the access road. FBI tactical units, state police, federal marshals, and ambulances. Someone had beaten her to the facility. Maya ditched the motorcycle a mile away and approached on foot, using her abilities to slip past the law enforcement perimeter. What she found inside the compound made her heart race with equal parts relief and terror. The FBI had moved faster than Maya had dared hope. Agent Sarah Chen, no relation despite the shared name, was leading a joint task force that had descended on the facility within 2 hours of the evidence release. They had found the children. All 12 of them were being loaded into ambulances, unconscious but alive. Maya could see Kevin's small form on a stretcher, surrounded by paramedics working to stabilize his vital signs. The other children showed signs of sedation and medical trauma, but they were breathing, their hearts beating, their young lives snatched back from the edge of destruction. Secure the lower levels. Agent Chen was ordering her teams. I want every document, every computer, every piece of equipment cataloged and preserved. This facility doesn't exist according to official records, so we need ironclad evidence of everything that happened here. Maya felt tears on her cheeks, the first time she'd cried in 3 years. The children were safe. Kevin was alive. Her desperate gamble had worked, but her relief was short-lived. Maya's enhanced hearing picked up Harrison's voice from inside the main building, and what she heard made her blood run cold. Initiate Omega Protocol, Harrison was saying into a secure radio. Full sterilization. Leave no trace. Omega Protocol. Maya remembered that designation from her years in the facility. It was the nuclear option literally. A small tactical device hidden in the facility's lower levels, designed to vaporize all evidence in case of catastrophic security breach. Harrison was going to detonate a nuclear bomb 30 miles outside Washington, D.C., killing hundreds of federal agents and destroying a multi-billion-dollar investigation, all to cover up his crimes. Maya moved without thinking, her form phasing through walls and security barriers as she raced toward the facility's underground levels. She had perhaps 10 minutes before the device activated. 10 minutes to find and disable a bomb that officially didn't exist. The lower levels were a maze of white corridors and sterile rooms, exactly as Maya remembered from her childhood. But now they were empty, abandoned in haste as Harrison's people evacuated. She followed the electromagnetic signature of the nuclear device, her abilities allowing her to track its energy field through multiple floors of reinforced concrete. She found Harrison in the deepest level of the facility, standing before a steel door marked with radiation warnings. His face was calm, resigned, almost peaceful. This was a man who had decided that if he couldn't win, he would ensure everyone else lost too. "Maya," he said without turning around. "I wondered if you would come." "Step away from the device, Harrison," Maya said, though she knew he wouldn't comply. "It's over. The children are safe. The evidence is public. The world knows what you've done. Don't make it worse by committing mass murder." Harrison turned to face her, and Maya was shocked by how much he had aged in the past 24 hours. His silver hair was disheveled, his usually immaculate suit wrinkled and stained. But his eyes still held that cold calculation she remembered from her childhood. "You think this is about covering up the program?" Harrison asked. "You think I'm doing this to save my own reputation? Aren't you?" Harrison shook his head. "The Ghost program was never about creating weapons, Maya. It was about creating protection. The world is full of threats that conventional military forces can't handle: supernatural entities, interdimensional incursions, reality-altering anomalies. We needed guardians who could stand against forces that exist outside normal physics." Maya stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "What are you talking about? You think you're the first person to manifest supernatural abilities?" Harrison continued. You think the government would invest billions of dollars and decades of research just to create better spies? Maya, there are things in this world that would drive normal people insane just by looking at them. There are entities that feed on human consciousness, phenomena that can rewrite the laws of physics, invasions from dimensions where the very concept of existence is different from ours. Maya felt the ground shifting beneath her feet, not physically but conceptually. Everything she thought she knew about the program, about her purpose, about the reason for her suffering, was being recontextualized. The children you saved today, Harrison said. They were being prepared to defend humanity against threats that governments can't acknowledge, that militaries can't fight, that the public can't know about. Every procedure they endured, every moment of pain, was to make them strong enough to stand against the darkness that wants to consume our reality. "You're insane," Maya whispered, but even as she spoke, pieces of a larger puzzle were falling into place. The strange tests they'd put her through, the exposure to anomalous materials, the training scenarios that seemed to involve impossible physics. What if it hadn't been random experimentation? What if they had been preparing her for something specific? "Am I?" Harrison asked. "Then explain your abilities, Maya. Explain how you can phase through solid matter, exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, perceive electromagnetic fields, communicate across vast distances through quantum entanglement. These aren't random mutations. They're evolutionary adaptations to a changing reality." Harrison pressed a button on the wall, and the steel door began to iris open, revealing not a nuclear device, but something far stranger. Maya found herself looking into a chamber that seemed to extend infinitely in all directions, filled with swirling patterns of light and shadow that hurt to look at directly. "This is why the facility was built here," Harrison explained. "Not for the program, but to monitor and contain this. We call it a rift, a tear in the fabric of reality that leads to somewhere else. They've been appearing all over the world for the past 30 years, increasing in frequency and size. The entities that come through them are hostile to human life in ways that conventional weapons can't address." Maya stepped closer to the chamber, her enhanced senses picking up energy readings that defied explanation. The space beyond the door seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions, folding back on itself in ways that made her head spin. "The children," she said slowly. "You were training them to fight this." "To fight what comes through it," Harrison corrected. "The last major incursion was in 2019. We lost an entire city in Montana, 14,000 people, simply erased from existence. The official story blamed a chemical plant explosion, but the truth is that something came through a rift and decided that human consciousness was incompatible with its concept of reality." Maya felt sick. If Harrison was telling the truth, then everything she'd done, releasing the evidence, exposing the program, saving the children, had left humanity defenseless against threats she couldn't imagine. "You're lying," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Ask yourself why your abilities manifested the way they did," Harrison pressed. "Dimensional phasing, quantum awareness, electromagnetic manipulation. These aren't random powers, Maya. They're specific countermeasures to entities that exist primarily in non-physical states. You were evolving to fight an enemy that most humans can't even perceive." Alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Maya's enhanced hearing picked up radio chatter from the FBI teams above, unknown energy readings from the lower levels. "Radiation spikes off the charts. Get those children out of here now. The rift is destabilizing," Harrison said grimly. "Your presence, your abilities, they're interacting with the containment field. In about 3 minutes, that chamber is going to tear itself apart and take half of Virginia with it." Maya looked from Harrison to the swirling chaos beyond the steel door, her mind racing. If he was telling the truth, then she had just triggered a catastrophe that would make the ghost Program's abuses looked trivial by comparison. If he was lying, then he was using her fear and confusion to manipulate her one final time. "How do I stop it?" she asked. "You can't," Harrison said, "but you can contain it. Your abilities allow you to exist partially outside normal space-time. You could enter the rift, close it from the inside, prevent the breach from expanding. At the cost of my life." "At the cost of your physical existence," Harrison corrected. "Your consciousness would survive in the dimensional matrix. You would become truly what we always called you, a ghost, protecting the world from threats it never knew existed." Maya stared into the chaos beyond the door, feeling the pull of energies that seemed to call to something deep in her altered DNA. Part of her recognized this place, understood it in ways that bypassed rational thought. She had been made for this, shaped by years of torture and conditioning to be a guardian against the impossible. But another part of her, the part that had learned to love Sarah's kindness, Roberto's friendship, Mrs. Patterson's innocent smiles, rebelled against the idea. She had just escaped one form of slavery. Was she about to voluntarily enter another? "The children," Maya said. "If I do this, what happens to them?" "They go free," Harrison promised. "No more programs, no more experiments. They get to live normal lives. And if I don't?" Harrison gestured toward the expanding chaos in the chamber. "Then none of us get to live any lives at all." Maya closed her eyes and reached out with her abilities, feeling the scope of the crisis Harrison described. The energy readings were off the charts, reality itself bending and warping around the dimensional breach. She could sense things moving in the space beyond the door, entities that regarded human existence as a cosmic mistake to be corrected. When she opened her eyes again, Maya found Harrison looking at her with something that might have been genuine regret. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for what we did to you, to all of you. The methods were monstrous, but the cause was real. The threats we prepared you to face are real. And now you're the only one who can stop this." Maya nodded slowly, accepting the terrible weight of truth and responsibility. She had spent 3 years fighting for her freedom, only to discover that true freedom might require the ultimate sacrifice. "Tell me about the others," she said. "The ghosts who died during the program. Did they die in training, or were they already fighting these ... things?" Harrison's expression confirmed her suspicion. Ghost 7, Lily Martinez, died closing a micro rift in Detroit. Ghost 4, David Kim, was lost in a dimensional pocket while preventing an incursion in Seattle. Ghost 9, Sarah Williams, is still alive, but her consciousness is distributed across multiple reality layers after she prevented a major breach in Denver. "You let me think they were dead." "We let you think they were failures," Harrison admitted. "It was easier than explaining that they were heroes who saved millions of lives by sacrificing their own humanity." Maya took a step toward the chamber, feeling the reality distortions intensifying around her. She could sense FBI agents evacuating the upper levels, could hear the mechanical groaning of the facility's structure as it tried to contain energies it was never designed to hold. "If I do this," Maya said, "I want guarantees, real ones. The children get full medical care, psychological support, new identities if they want them. No government agency ever contacts them again unless they choose it voluntarily." "Done. Sarah Martinez, Roberto, Mrs. Patterson, Jake from the coffee shop, they get protection. If anyone in the government ever threatens them because of their connection to me, the deal is off." "Agreed." Maya paused at the threshold of the chamber, looking back at Harrison one final time. "Was any of it real? Did you ever actually care about the children in the program? Or were we always just weapons to you?" Harrison was quiet for a long moment. "I have 17 grandchildren," he said finally. "Every night for the past 20 years, I've gone to sleep knowing that my work might be the only thing standing between them and horrors they'll never know existed. The children in the program ... I told myself they were soldiers in a war most people couldn't fight. But they were also children. And I failed them in ways that will haunt me forever. Maya felt something shift inside her chest, not forgiveness, but understanding. Harrison was a monster, but he was a monster created by impossible circumstances, forced to make choices that would destroy anyone's humanity. "Goodbye, Director," Maya said, and stepped into the chaos. The moment her foot crossed the threshold, reality exploded around her. Maya felt her physical form dissolving, her consciousness expanding across multiple dimensions simultaneously. She was everywhere and nowhere, existing in spaces between spaces, feeling the fabric of reality bend and twist around her presence. The entities Harrison had warned her about were there, pressing against the boundaries of normal spacetime like infection seeking to spread. Maya could perceive them now in ways that would have driven her insane before the facility's conditioning. Beings of pure malice that regarded human existence as a cosmic error to be corrected. But Maya was no longer entirely human herself. Years of experimentation had changed her at the quantum level, made her into something that could exist in the spaces where these entities thrived. She became a barrier, a living seal between realities. Her consciousness spread across the dimensional matrix like a net designed to catch nightmares. The struggle was beyond physical, beyond anything that could be described in human language. Maya fought beings that existed as living concepts, entities that could rewrite the laws of physics by thinking differently about them. She held the line not with weapons or strength, but with the power of human will made manifest across multiple realities. And slowly, impossibly, she began to win. The breach contracted, the chaos subsided. The reality distortions faded back to manageable levels. Maya felt the rift sealing itself around her, containing the threats that had tried to pour through into her world. She was trapped now, existing as a guardian spirit in the spaces between dimensions. But the people she cared about were safe. Harrison watched from the observation deck as the readings returned to normal. As the immediate crisis passed, Chen was gone, transformed into something beyond human understanding. But her sacrifice had saved millions of lives. Above ground, FBI agents were loading the 12 rescued children into medical transport vehicles. Kevin was stable, his neural damage reversible with proper treatment. The others would need months of therapy and care, but they would recover. They would live normal lives, free from the burden of being weapons in a war they'd never understood. Facility was shut down permanently, its official existence denied by every government agency. The evidence Maya had released sparked congressional hearings, international investigations, and fundamental changes to oversight of classified programs. The Ghost Project was exposed, condemned, and officially terminated. But in the deeper levels of the complex, behind steel doors marked with radiation warnings, monitoring equipment continued to track stable energy readings from a contained dimensional anomaly. The official reports classified it as a residual electromagnetic phenomena of unknown origin. Only Harrison knew the truth, that Maya Chen still existed in those readings, still stood guard against threats most people could never imagine. Dr. Voss was arrested the following morning, charged with crimes against humanity. Agent Martinez faced court-martial for his role in the program. Agent Thompson, who had provided crucial testimony to the FBI about the facility's operations, was granted immunity in exchange for his cooperation. The children were placed in witness protection, given new names and families that could provide the love and stability they'd been denied. Regular psychological evaluations showed steady improvement, though all of them would carry scars from their experiences for the rest of their lives. Sarah Martinez, the nurse who had been Maya's only friend, received a letter 2 weeks after the facility raid. It contained no return address, no explanation. Just a single sentence. "Thank you for teaching me that kindness still exists in the world." Roberto and the other homeless veterans found their encampment mysteriously free from police harassment. Their informal community protected by what seemed like bureaucratic oversight, but was actually careful intervention. by federal agencies who had received very specific instructions about their welfare. Mrs. Patterson continued feeding stray cats in the park, never knowing that the quiet girl who sometimes sat on nearby benches had become something far stranger and more wonderful than she could ever imagine. 6 months after the Ghost Project exposure, Dr. Elena Vasquez walked through the halls of the newly established Center for Anomalous Phenomenon Research, reviewing reports that would have been classified far beyond her security clearance just a year earlier. As the government's newly appointed special advisor on supernatural threats, she had access to information that redefined humanity's place in the universe. The Ghost Project scandal had forced a complete restructuring of how the federal government dealt with paranormal phenomena. Instead of secret programs run without oversight, there was now a transparent agency accountable to Congress and international human rights organizations. Instead of experimenting on children, they recruited volunteers from military special forces and provided full psychological support throughout their service. Most importantly, they had learned from Maya Chen's sacrifice. "Ma'am," called Agent David Park, Elena's chief of staff and one of the few people cleared to know the full truth about the dimensional breach in Virginia. "We have the monthly report from Site 7. Elena accepted the tablet and reviewed the energy readings from the contained rift. For 6 months, the dimensional anomaly had remained stable, showing no signs of expansion or destabilization. The entities on the other side seemed to have accepted that this particular breach was permanently sealed. What the reports couldn't capture was the presence Elena sometimes felt when she visited the facility, a consciousness that seemed to watch over the monitoring station, ensuring that nothing would ever threaten the world Maya had died to protect. Any communication attempts? Elena asked, though she knew the answer. They'd tried every method available to make contact with whatever remained of Maya Chen in the dimensional matrix, but there had been no response. "Nothing direct," Agent Park replied, "but Dr. Morrison in the physics department thinks the energy fluctuations we've been seeing might be some kind of pattern, like she's trying to tell us something." Elena nodded and made a note to review those fluctuations personally. If Maya was indeed conscious within the dimensional barrier, it was possible she was observing threats from the other side and trying to communicate intelligence about potential future incursions. The elevator took them down to the medical wing, where the real triumph of the past 6 months was unfolding. 12 children who had once been subjects in an illegal experimentation program were now thriving under the care of specialists who understood both their unique abilities and their need for normal childhood experiences. Kevin Williams, his new last name chosen in honor of one of the ghost children who hadn't survived, was in the playroom with 3 other children, building an elaborate castle out of blocks. At 6 years old, he showed no lasting effects from the neural trauma he'd suffered. The ability he'd manifested precognitive flashes that let him see a few seconds into the future was considered a gift now, not a weapon to be exploited. "Mr. Kevin," called Dr. Lisa Chen, no relation to Maya, despite the shared name, the child psychologist who supervised his care. "How are you feeling today?" "Good," Kevin replied, his concentration focused on placing a particularly tricky tower block. "The scary dreams are gone. And I saw that you brought chocolate cookies today." Dr. Chen smiled and pulled a small bag from her pocket. Kevin's precognitive abilities were still developing, but they seemed to be stabilizing at a level that enhanced his life rather than overwhelming it. With proper support and understanding, his gift might help him become anything he wanted to be. Across the room, Ana Rodriguez was painting a mural on one of the walls, a landscape that seemed to shift and change depending on the viewing angle, displaying her ability to manipulate light and perception. At 9 years old, she was already showing artistic talents that had nothing to do with her supernatural abilities and everything to do with her natural creativity finally being allowed to flourish. "It's beautiful, Ana," Elena said, stopping to admire the young girl's work. What is it? It's the place where the nice lady lives now, Aina replied matter-of-factly. She's always watching to make sure the monsters don't come through. Alina felt a chill run down her spine. Aina's abilities included a form of dimensional perception that let her see into spaces that normal human senses couldn't access. If she was seeing Maya in the dimensional matrix, what does the nice lady look like? Alina asked carefully. Aina considered the question seriously, her brush poised over her palette. She looks sad sometimes, but not scared. And she glows like she's made of starlight. She waves at me sometimes when I'm sleeping. Alina made another note. Aina's testimony might be the first confirmed contact with Maya since the dimensional breach. If Maya was indeed conscious and aware, she might be able to provide intelligence about threats from beyond normal reality. The afternoon was spent reviewing progress reports for all 12 children. Marcus had shown remarkable aptitude for mathematics and was already studying calculus despite being only 12 years old. His ability to perceive quantum probability matrices giving him insights into advanced physics that amazed his tutors. Sarah was learning to control her empathic abilities through meditation and art therapy, creating sculptures that seemed to capture and reflect the emotional states of everyone around them. Each child was receiving individual attention, custom-designed therapy programs, and most importantly, the chance to simply be children. They attended regular school with their new families, played sports, made friends, experienced birthday parties and holiday celebrations, and all the normal milestones that had been stolen from them during their years in the facility. Alina's next stop was the congressional briefing room, where she would present her monthly report to the Joint Committee overseeing supernatural threat assessment. The exposure of the Ghost Project had led to unprecedented transparency in government paranormal research, with public hearings and civilian oversight ensuring that the abuses of the past could never be repeated. Congressman Michael Torres, chairman of the committee, was a former prosecutor who had built his career on exposing government corruption. The Ghost Project scandal had given him the platform to demand fundamental changes in how classified programs operated. Dr. Vasquez, he began as Alina took her place at the witness table. How many active dimensional anomalies are we currently monitoring? 47 confirmed sites worldwide, Alina replied, referring to her prepared notes. 17 are considered stable and contained. 23 are showing signs of expansion and require active monitoring, and 7 are classified as immediate threats requiring intervention. And our response capabilities? Significantly improved. Since the restructuring, we now have volunteer teams trained in supernatural threat response, proper equipment designed specifically for dimensional anomalies, and most importantly, ethical oversight of all operations. The hearing continued for 2 hours, covering everything from budget allocations to international cooperation treaties. The questions were tough but fair, designed to ensure that the new agency was operating transparently and effectively. But Alina's mind kept returning to Aina's painting, to the image of Maya glowing like starlight in the spaces between realities. If Maya was indeed conscious in the dimensional matrix, then she wasn't just a sacrifice, she was an active guardian, standing watch against threats that might emerge from beyond normal space-time. After the hearing, Alina drove to the small cemetery outside Richmond, where a memorial had been erected for the victims of the Ghost Project. Maya's name was inscribed on black granite along with the other children who had died during the program's operation. There was no body buried here. Maya's physical form had been dissolved in the dimensional breach, but the memorial served as a place where people who had known her could come to remember. Alina wasn't surprised to find she wasn't alone. Sarah Martinez sat on a bench facing Maya's memorial, her nurse's uniform wrinkled from a long shift at the hospital. She'd been coming here every week since the memorial was dedicated, bringing flowers and sitting quietly for an hour before returning to her work. "Mind if I join you?" Alina asked. Sarah looked up, recognizing Elena from the news coverage of the Ghost Project hearings. "You're Dr. Vasquez, aren't you? The one in charge of the new agency. Elena, please. And you're Sarah Martinez, Maya's friend." Sarah nodded and gestured to the empty space on the bench. "I keep thinking she might show up one day, you know? Just appear out of nowhere the way she used to. It's stupid, I know she's gone, but—" "It's not stupid," Elena said gently. "And you might not be wrong. We have reason to believe that Maya's consciousness might have survived in some form." Sarah turned to stare at her. "What do you mean?" Elena explained about the energy readings. The patterns in the dimensional data, Ana's visions of a woman made of starlight. She watched Sarah's expression shift from grief to wonder to something that might have been hope. In her own quarters, Maya sat at her desk and began writing her weekly report to the Global Interdimensional Council, but tonight the words came slowly. Outside her window, the aurora-like phenomena generated by stable dimensional rifts painted the sky in impossible colors, a reminder that reality itself had become more beautiful since humanity learned to embrace rather than fear the unknown. Soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Kevin stood in the doorway, now 36 and serving as the Academy's Director of Student Welfare. His precognitive abilities had evolved to encompass not just future events, but potential emotional outcomes, making him uniquely qualified to help young interdimensional refugees navigate their traumatic transitions. "The Morrison twins are having integration difficulties," he said, referring to two children whose consciousness existed simultaneously across 3 different dimensional layers. "They're scared they'll never feel normal again." Maya smiled knowingly. "Send them to my office tomorrow. I think it's time I told them about Little Mouse." Kevin nodded and turned to leave, then paused. "Maya, the council meeting next week, my precognition is showing some significant probability shifts. I think they're going to ask us to take on something bigger." "Bigger how?" "First contact protocol development. There's something massive moving in the deep dimensional layers, not hostile, but ancient, older than our local cosmic cluster. The refugees we've been helping are just the advance wave." Maya leaned back in her chair, processing the implications. For 15 years, they had been managing a crisis of cosmic refugees from dying realities. Now it seemed they were about to encounter something that predated the current structure of existence itself. "Are we ready?" she asked. Kevin's expression was thoughtful. "We're as ready as anyone can be for the impossible. The children we've trained, the systems we've built, the bridges we've created between realities, it's all been preparation for this moment, even if we didn't know it." After Kevin left, Maya walked to her window and looked out at the Academy grounds. Students from dozens of realities were visible even in the darkness, beings of living light who attended night classes, entities that existed primarily as mathematical concepts but maintained physical avatars for social interaction, and human children whose abilities had manifested in response to interdimensional exposure. They weren't just students. They were the first generation of truly cosmic citizens, beings who understood that reality was vast and strange and beautiful in ways their ancestors could never have imagined. They were what humanity was becoming, not conquerors of the cosmos, but participants in its infinite complexity. Maya's reflection was interrupted by a familiar presence in her mind. Elena Vasquez, now Director Emeritus of the Global Supernatural Defense Initiative, was using the quantum consciousness link that all former Ghost Project subjects shared. Maya, Elena's mental voice, carried decades of friendship and mutual respect. "The deep space monitoring stations have detected something approaching the local dimensional matrix. It's bigger than anything we've encountered, possibly a mobile reality cluster. The council wants to convene an emergency session. How much time do we have?" Maya responded through the link. 18 months, maybe 2 years. But Maya... This isn't like the refugee situation. Whatever's coming, it's not running from something. It's looking for something. Maya closed her eyes and extended her consciousness into the dimensional layers she could perceive. Feeling for the presence, Elena described. There at the very edge of her perception, she sensed it. Ancient, vast, patient, and curious, not hostile. Not desperate like the refugees they'd been helping. This presence felt scholarly, as if it were seeking knowledge rather than sanctuary. It's looking for us. Maya realized with sudden clarity. We've become visible to the deep cosmos. Our integration of refugee realities, our development of interdimensional technology, our transformation from a single world species to cosmic participants, we've attracted the attention of something very old and very interested in civilizations that successfully navigate dimensional complexity. First contact. Elena asked. First contact, Maya confirmed. Not with refugees or entities in crisis, but with something that represents the ancient cosmic community. We're about to be evaluated for membership in something much larger than we ever imagined. The next morning, Maya stood before her students and announced that their education was about to expand beyond even the Academy's ambitious curriculum. They would be humanity's ambassadors to being so ancient that they remembered the formation of the first stable realities. "Are you scared, Professor?" asked Maria Santos, now a graduate student working on her doctoral thesis in applied dimensional physics. Maya thought about the question seriously. The scared little girl called Little Mouse would have been terrified. The traumatized weapon known as Ghost 11 would have seen only another threat to be neutralized. Even the guardian who had sacrificed herself to protect her world might have approached this as another battle to fight. But Maya Chen, teacher and bridge between worlds, felt only excitement. After decades of healing from trauma, of learning to transform suffering into wisdom, of discovering that the cosmos was far stranger and more wonderful than anyone had ever dreamed, she was ready for whatever came next. "No," she told Maria with absolute conviction, "I'm curious." And curiosity has always been humanity's greatest strength. As the ancient presence continued its approach toward Earth's dimensional matrix, Maya began preparing for the most important first contact in human history. The children who had once been weapons would now serve as diplomats. The trauma that had nearly destroyed them would become the foundation for unprecedented understanding. The story that had begun with a frightened 7-year-old girl in a white room was about to become something much larger, humanity's first chapter in the infinite library of cosmic civilization. Little Mouse had become something magnificent, the first human to speak for her species to the ancient intelligences that governed the deep structures of reality itself. And she was ready.